Greetings friends and welcome to episode 34 of the Innsmouth Book Club. I'm one of your hosts, Rob Poyton.
And I'm the other one, Tim Mendes.
And as you can see, we've come straight to the town square today. In fact, we're standing outside the museum because, Tim, I hear the museum has reopened.
It has, yeah. After the strange leak and all sorts of other random stuff,
yeah,
it's reopened again, yeah.
Brilliant. So we're going to go in, and they've got a special exhibition, I hear, as well, of a certain musical instrument.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. A certain, weird musical instrument belonging to a certain composer.
In fact, I think I can hear the strange sounds of something just coming out of the door now. Shall we go in and investigate?
Let's go and have a look, yeah.
So here we are, and yes, who's that? It's John Chadwick. John, I didn't know you could play the viol.
It's more a case of holding it. It seems to play itself. That's weird. But hi, welcome back to the museum.
So yes, thanks, John. As some of our listeners may or may not know, John Chadwick is co-host and also works here at Innsmouth Museum, which means, now it's reopened again. We get in to see all these lovely exhibits. I should just say, by the way, with the exhibits, be careful not to touch any of them, and also be careful not to let any of them touch you.
Yes.
But yeah, everything's back to normal, is it, John?
Look at the place. It's pristine. We've even been down to the SES sale and got some sofas. And, it's brilliant, isn't it?
I thought they were looking kind of plush.
Yeah.
It's a nice lime green colour they have as well. That fits in well with the decor.
Absolutely. But, I mean, it's wonderful, isn't it? Look at it. It's like a new place almost, apart from the non-Euclidean architecture.
Yeah, the cyclopean pillars. Yeah.
I try not to stare at those too long. It makes my brain hurt.
That's why I've got one bong-eyed.
So we've got the very viol on display that was used by Erich Zann, because that's who we're talking about today. The music of Erich Zann, in fact, which was written in December 1921 by Mr. Lovecraft, and quite a short story and quite compact in its setting. I mean, it pretty much all takes place in a room.
Yes.
And I think there's a few interesting things with this. One thing, it's quite commonly held view, is that this is the first Lovecraftian story that he wrote. Prior to this, he'd been very Poe or Dunsany.
Yeah.
And this was the first time he felt he found his voice, perhaps.
Yeah, I'd go along with that, because, we'd had all the more of the Dreamland stuff, which was very Dunsany, wasn't it, So, I think this one is like the first real Lovecraft feeling story, isn't it?
It certainly has a feel of The King in Yellow about it. Even the setting, which I've scanned through, and I've thought, does he actually mention this city and where this city is, and why is it French, and what have you? But certainly, yeah. Yeah,
I agree with the Chambers thing. It put me in mind of the Court of the Dragon and that kind of feel.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you'd have read Chambers at this time or not. We did say before when we covered that story when he discovered Chambers. But that's the other thing I wanted to bring up was the location, because people naturally assume Paris. Yet, as far as I know, Paris is quite flat, and here we have a very steep hill. The house is at the top of a very steep hill with steps. I don't know if that fits in with anywhere in Paris at all.
I don't know.
I don't know. No. I've never been to Paris. I've no idea. But from what I've seen of it on the telly and stuff, it is pretty flat. It's like a billiard table, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's like London. It sits in a sort of valley, I think.
It's built on top of a very hard rock.
Right.
Apparently, which sounds like it was chosen for being defensible and defendable, and probably that is the reason why it's very flat.
Yeah. Well, perhaps more better travelled listeners out there can let us know. I've been in Paris for about 2 hours. It was on a stopover for something, so I didn't really get a chance to see anything.
I saw Disneyland. That's all I've been to.
Not Innsmouth Land. Are they still building Innsmouth Land here, I think, aren't they? Dagon's playground is still under construction, as far as I know.
But it stopped and got rusty, and then they had to start again. It was like the fairground in Silent Hill.
Yeah, I've seen that Ferris wheel. Yeah.
The Ferris wheel of doom.
The Ferris wheel of doom. It kind of looks like an Elder sign, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's not like that little fairground park area in Chernobyl after the explosion.
Oh, that's grim. That's grim.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The scariest thing of the Innsmouth place is the under 12s go free sign. That was a bit grim. But I wondered if this wasn't more a place like Carcassonne or one of those old medieval fortress places, because we get mention of this big wall as well.
Yeah.
That Zann's window overlooks. It kind of put me in mind more of that type of place.
Yeah, I'd probably go along with that. I mean, I'm having a bit of difficulty now remembering what's in the original one and what's in all of the stories that have spun off it from other writers. Because I've read a hell of a lot of stories like that have come off the music of Erich Zann. One particular, the Brian Stableford legacy of Erich Zann, that puts it as Paris. But I don't think it works as Paris. Personally, I think you're right. I think it's one of the more medievally places. Yeah.
I went to Mount Saint Michel once when I was much younger, and it kind of has a feel of that's a weird place, very much like St Michael's Mount in Cornwall, where you have to get up to this abbey at the top. You go around in this big kind of like corkscrew, and there's all these buildings around in this big spiral that leads up to this place at the top, and it's very, very medieval. It felt a bit like that, but without jumping the gun, I think that there's something about this that people are missing the point of, that we're presuming that area where the Rue, and my French is appalling.
I'm not even going to attempt it.
the Rue d'Orsay. Again, that's very poor pronunciation.
Right.
But the name is interesting. I'll come on to that.
It's incredibly important is the name, because to get over to this area, you've got to cross a bridge over this god-awful river, right?
Yeah.
Which has a feeling of Styx or Hades about it. And bridges are liminal places of passing through. And dare I use the word threshold?
Yeah.
And then I'll leave everything else to what Rob was going to say later. So I don't think that this area of the city is actually part of Paris.
Yeah, that's a good observation, I think.
And that's a very Chambers thing, isn't it? That's a very sort of very Chambers kind of tactic, that, with like the Court of the Dragon and stuff like that. And it's like, is that a real place? Is it not? It's,
And we have to remember that he doesn't find the place again.
Yes, exactly.
So it has that feeling of street that Kafka lived on, which is all very small little houses leading up to the castle in Prague. And the end of the street, there's like a legend that basically there's an area that comes off the end of that street that only appears once in a blue moon.
Yeah. That's not an uncommon kind of legend, is it? I mean, you can almost go, we've got these ideas like Narnia, or these places that fade in and out, or they're attached to our plane, and at certain times, often certain times of the year, well, All Hallows Eve as an example, the veil thins or the veil lifts at certain times. But
so I think we're talking about liminal places.
Yeah, because the actual phrase, and again, terrible pronunciation, Auseul, that's Auseul, actually means at the threshold.
Yeah.
So the street at the threshold is the literal name. So HPL knew what he was doing there.
This is one of those moments where he shines.
Yes.
And he's saying, I have the cult knowledge. And which is baffling when you think about how he confuses things in later stories, mixing up books and saying, "Oh, this is a book of witchcraft," and it's actually no, it's not. This is a book on how to find witches.
Yeah,
but he's planted it in there, and it is actually something quite typical of occultists to do. Yes. It's kind of like suggesting, here we go, here's a gem. but I'm not involved.
It's a misdirection, isn't it? It's like a, you know.
It is. And none was better than that than Dennis Wheatley.
Yeah.
Who told people to stay away and it's dangerous. But I know people. But stay away, it's dangerous, don't get involved. It'll drive you insane, it'll drive you mad. It's like it's communicating to those who need to know and saying to those who need to stay away.
It's a Machen tactic as well. Arthur Machen did quite a lot of that in his Three Imposters.
Right.
In the stories through that, there's a lot of that in there, just saying, you know, you might not want to look at this, but if you did,
this is where you'd go to find it.
This is where you do it. Yeah.
Going back to Machen as well, there's a fair bit of Pan in this, isn't there?
Yes.
Zann's got a satire-like face. We get the pandemonium. The music is pandemonium.
Yes.
And at the end, where he hears the music from beyond, if we can call it that, he gets a vision of satyrs dancing in the mist and in the fog. So
and this wonderful word, bacchanals, or something.
Bacchanals.
Yeah,
that is a great word. Isn't
it's not Bacchus, but it's beings related to somehow.
Yeah.
It's all orgies. It's all mystery skill type madness.
And in that sense, this relates much more to Greek myth. We know HPL was big on his classics.
Yes.
There's no real hint of Cthulhu mythos in this, I don't think. I mean, it can be put into that, in a sense, because we have the theme of something from beyond or worlds from beyond, but it's not explicitly Cthulhuoid.
No, because I mean, I could see that sort of like the chaos, the pandemonium. I think a lot of people, like in retrospect, have sort of associated that with Azathoth.
Right.
You know, the blind idiot god, the chaos, because he's always accompanied by flutes, isn't he?
Yes.
Demonic piping, as it.
Yes.
So I think a lot of people in like have retro, you know, retconned it almost into the Cthulhu mythos. But I think it's more of a Machen thing.
Yeah.
Because we know Lovecraft was a huge fan of Arthur Machen. So, I mean, Dunwich Horror was, you know, was a riff on Great God Pan.
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah. So it stands to reason, doesn't it? You know.
And our patrons will have seen, I think it was in the December Innsmouth News, I wrote an article about Lovecraft's use of music.
Yes.
And obviously this is the premiere story with music in. But as you say, it's present in a lot of other things, particularly in relation to the piping and the flutes around Azathoth. Yeah. And then the speculation is that music to keep Azathoth asleep, because we're all part of his dream, so when he wakes up, we're gone.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of interesting theories around that music.
I think what's really interesting is that in one of the biographies of Lovecraft that I read, that were talking about how he is one of the things that he doesn't seem to kind of like mention a lot of his love of music or what have you, and that he wasn't really into it. But I don't read that. I think that there is a lot of mention of music and sounds.
There is. It's like any time old Nyarlathotep pops up, it's always like weird cadence pipes and flutes and or you know, all that kind of stuff.
He uses that kind of music a lot to set that unworldly or unearthly tone.
Yes.
The only time you get nice music is in some of the Dreamlands stories, where you get the nice peal of bells and trumpets in Cellophase or places like that. But pretty much the whole rest of the time, it's always this unsettling music. And the obvious thing with this piece is people think of Stravinsky, right? The Rites of Spring, which I think was 1913. That was first performed, and well, some accounts say it caused a riot because it was so out there. So you think that would be quite a good fit for this stuff, but apparently that wasn't heard in the States until about 1928. I think were the first recordings. It wasn't actually. It was performed in New York in 1930, so it was sort of way after this. And Lovecraft actually wrote, he was, this might come as no surprise, he was a fan of Wagner.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
And he actually he said something like the music of Debussy and Stravinsky didn't do much for old uncle. He kind of switched off when he heard that sort of stuff. So while Stravinsky, you can say could be a good fit, it appears there'd be no direct influence there.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It is interesting. I mean, there is one mention of it sounding, it's sounding like a Hungarian piece of folk music or something at one point.
Yeah.
Again, there's this whole thing about foreigners. I mean, the old man himself, the languages, he's trying to write French, but not very well.
Yeah.
But then he writes better in German, but then he's playing this thing that's Hungarian, and it's still got this feeling of those from outside are doing things that isn't pure or something or other. It still has a notion of that.
But then there's that idea: is Zann the protector, though? Because is he keeping these forces at bay? And again, it's nice. It's never you get that impression because he's worried about the curtain twitches or whatever it is, and it scares him, right? So you get the impression.
Yeah, so he gets his old whips it out and starts fiddling away. Yeah,
that's what one does.
I did wonder about it because. It's kind of like a little bit of, I was looking out of the window and I couldn't quite work out where this music was coming from. Was it over the wall or was it from another garret? And there's that kind of little bit of confusion. And it made me think of the old myth of the battling magicians that you get even as far back as Simon Magus versus one of the disciples. Can't remember which one it was. It might be Peter, might be Paul, but you get that quite a lot in a lot of different folklore kind of traditions, and it seemed to me that if that is the case, then Erich Zann obviously loses. But I quite like that. There's a nice little Peter Jackson film that he made very early on where he's got two people playing music at each other, and it ends up their houses kind of like become like mech warriors or something. It's great.
I haven't seen that.
See if you can find it.
I'll see if I can dig that up on YouTube.
Yeah.
That sounds bonkers.
Yeah, it is bonkers.
I'll have to watch that.
It's wonderful.
Great.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't know what point he made this in his career, but yeah.
The other thing I was wondering if it's this idea of order versus chaos, because as we know, music can be very mathematical in a sense.
Yes.
And is he using
especially that style? Of thing. Yeah.
And is that keeping back this chaos that's threatening to encroach upon the world, perhaps? But then, on the other hand, it seems that Zann fails, right? Because at the end, the room goes totally dark. I love that bit where the student is feeling around the room and he feels Zann is still playing. He feels the bow.
Yes.
But he's dead.
But he's dead. I love that. That's a brilliant image, isn't it? Yeah. It's just like, I remember the first time I read that. It was one of the first Lovecraft stories I read, and that image, that scene has always stuck with me. The bit that there's actually this corpse they're playing this music. It's just like just weird.
It's almost like a little throwaway line, isn't it? You can kind of miss it if you're not careful, but the implication's really creepy.
Yeah.
And I think someone mentioned, actually, possibly on the HP Podcraft when they covered this, the idea of Zann says, "I'm going to tell you everything," and he sits down and starts writing out in German, and he's writing for an hour. And I said, imagine doing a stage version of this, and you have this guy sitting there for an hour. Be quite dull.
But he also doesn't he say when he's writing that his hand, he uses the word flying.
Right.
So he's not just writing for an hour.
It's really writing.
Like insanely writing.
Yeah. Almost like he's either channeling something.
Yeah, it's like automatic writing, isn't it? It's like that whole thing,
Yeah. Or he's kept it bottled up for so long and now he can tell someone. I mean, he must have got through how many sheets of foolscap in an hour? What's the word count? As a writer, that would be quite an impressive word count, isn't it? Probably longer than the actual story itself, I would have thought.
Probably, yeah.
And it all gets lost. It all gets blown out on this cosmic wind at the end and scattered. So we never know.
Yeah, I love that the visions of the window and all that. It's one of his most sort of evocative, and you can visualize it. all this weird crap going on outside the window and this corpse there playing away. And it's just such a great image. I'm surprised there's not, I mean, I know there's been a short made of it.
Right.
But I'm surprised nobody's done like a proper adaptation of it. Because that, for me, it's one of his stories that would work on the screen.
Well, you certainly keep it fairly low budget because you've got a single set, haven't you? You've not got, there's not a lot of special effects going on, is there really? I suppose the biggest challenge is presenting the music from beyond. Oh, there's an album title, the music from beyond.
The music from beyond.
The image of the window actually reminded me of Fulci. He did that in. I think we covered the film. Was it the City of the Living Dead?
City of Living Dead,
with all the maggots flying in.
That's a great.
And obviously,
film.
That's supposed to be a hood and a nod and a wink to Lovecraft.
There's similar bits in the Beyond as well, isn't there? I love that trilogy. With City of the Living Dead, Beyond, and House by the Cemetery. They're one of some of the most Lovecraftian films ever made.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that before. I can see that.
Just minus the maggots.
Minus the maggots. Yeah.
Well, that's quite low.
Oh, Lucio did like his maggots.
He liked torturing women with horrible things. It's like, what's the most horrible thing I can throw at this person?
Zombie flesh eaters. It's like every different type of creepy wriggly thing he can possibly find.
Perhaps he had a deal with his local fishing shop or something. Who knows?
You can just see him down on the beach, can't you? Getting some lugworms.
Oh, they're horrible looking things, aren't they?
You wouldn't even have to in Hull, where I was a student. The vending machines, you could buy live bait in vending machines at train stations.
That's bizarre.
Really
weird.
Train stations, petrol stations. It was kind of like,
Really?
it was almost like something Japanese about it.
I was going to say that's a very Japanese thing, isn't it? Yeah.
I was going to say it's quite Innsmouthian if you can buy lugworms at vending machines.
But it was just really peculiar. I seem to remember buying some just to have the experience, and then setting the worms free.
I've got this image now of like the old bubblegum machines where you put your 10p in and turn that thing full of wriggling worms.
Oh dear, there's another story in that as well.
There is, isn't there? My gears are turning on that now.
I just would like to point out that Hull is on the East Coast. Let's leave it there.
All the best haunted sea towns are on the East Coast, right?
Yes,
and slightly decayed around the edges. So I think that's it for Erich Zann. So it's quite a short story, but one of Lovecraft's most effective.
Can I just point out one thing that I noticed about it? The way that he describes the buildings going up the hill is almost like he's starting to get into the whole non-Euclidean architecture.
It is, isn't it? It's crazy angles and odd angles.
Yeah. It's a bit of a forerunner, I think, maybe to Dreams of the Witch House.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's like the way he describes that place is very similar to how he describes Arkham at the beginning of Dreams of the Witch House. The streets off at strange angles and creeping up the hill and all these decayed old buildings and stuff. It's very, very similar. Yeah, I can see that.
And there's one last thing that I felt like I wanted to bring up about it. It's a quote from Alan Moore. I believe that it was his foreword for The Dark Knight Returns, the Frank Miller book. Yeah. And he put a wonderful line in there saying that basically both Dostoevsky and Van Gogh described madness as being nothing but a chair in a room.
Oh,
nice.
Oh, that's good.
But now if you go and have a look at Dreams of a Witch House and you look at the music of Erich Zann, there's something there about it that
so we're into that almost like psychogeography thing, aren't we?
Where like Fritz Leiber,
the architecture of the place has an effect of its own.
Yeah, definitely.
Good. I just wanted to finish with the musical thing. Do you guys have any pieces of music that you find particularly scary or unsettling?
Lots.
Or
Oh, I love Lieback. Lieback are one of my favourite bands, man.
Anything
I'm
by
into all that
Lieback.
stuff. That's what I say. I've got loads. I've got like, tons of records by all these people, like Current 93 and Lieback and Psychic TV and Throbbing Gristle and all these guys. I just don't know about them. All this stuff, man. I love it.
Their cover version album of Let It Be. It's Let It Be on one side, and it's Opus.
It's brilliant.
Die on the other. I can't remember if it's Opus is the German band, and it was the album was Opus Die, or the band was Opus Die. And
the album was Opus Die. Yeah,
such an amazing way of doing something with those familiar songs.
They did a lot of it. NATO was the one that is like they did all their like final countdown and turned it into this sort of Wagnerian nightmare. It's amazing. I love it. I'm gonna have to put on some Lieback this afternoon now.
I'll see if we can get a link up to that then in the notes.
See as well then if you can find the latest album that Ministry brought out, and they've got a cover version of Search and Destroy on there, which has been totally slowed down, and it has a whole different feel altogether. I believe Dave Navarro's playing guitar on it.
Yes, he is. Yeah. It's on the Cover Up album, isn't it? Ministry and Co-Conspirators. Yeah.
I had two that are quite different from that because, again, that's not a lot of stuff that I listen to. Some of it's certainly Psychic TV and Throbbing Gristle I've listened to, but one was the soundtrack from 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Ooh, nice. Yeah.
There are some on that. It's the voices. They're just vocal tracks pretty much. They're very creepy. I always found those. And the other one was... I got this CD. I used to work for a music company, and we used to get free CDs, or they had a trolley in the corridor. They had samples on there, just say help yourself. And I picked up this thing called Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima, and it's by a Polish composer called Penderecki. I think it was written about 1960, and I'll put a link up to there's some YouTube clips of it. And as you can imagine from the title, the subject matter, it's not... it's certainly not easy listening.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and it's very much string instruments as well, you know. So I thought if someone was going to do an adaptation of this story, they've got some ideas there for for the soundtrack.
There's a wonderful CD, a collection of folk music that came out of the Witchcraft Museum in Boscastle called Songs of Witchcraft and Magic, I believe. And there is some really strange old folk songs. I mean, they're all traditional. And the weirdest ones are the ones that are talking about Christianity in a positive sense, because a lot of those old folk traditions went into Christianity, and there's and Christianity was part of that magical tradition. And there's one that's kind of, the lines are, I love my Lord Jesus more beyond anything, but it's got this slow drone.
Nice.
And which I presume is a violin or something that's playing. It might be a hurdy-gurdy or something, I don't know.
It's not John Cowell, is it? Shiny boots of leather.
It is freaky.
No, there is a creepy instrument, the hurdy-gurdy. There's something really wrong about the hurdy-gurdy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to continue the musical theme on this visit because we're going to nip across to the Picturehouse now. You coming across with us, John? We've got a lovely musical film lined up, I believe, Tim.
Oh, we have indeed. Yeah. And I've never seen it. I can't believe that I haven't seen it yet. It's just...
All right. If we get across now, we should just be in time for Pearl and Scream.
Are you fed up with small boys making slapping noises and laughing behind you on the bus? As we go through the change, we can often lose our hair. If this worries you, then you should come on over to Innsmouth Wigs and peruse our fine selection of syrups. We have a complete range of styles and fashions, all handcrafted from genuine human hair. Try our traditional pudding bowl. Or you could go for the Innsmouth bouffant. Works great with a tiara. Or perhaps you prefer our bestseller, the classic mullet. Prices start from as little as $29.99. It's a small price to pay. Innsmouth Wigs, 35 Marsh Lane. Will be here today.
Innsmouth Wigs, only 100 yards from the theatre.
We need a man that is simple perfection. There's nothing that's harder to find. Someone to lead us, protect us and feed us.
Well, there we are. That was... Now, I want to correct myself because I think last episode I said we're going to watch The Phantom of Paradise. And the actual title is Phantom of the Paradise.
Yes.
The Paradise being the name of the club that Swan opens. So it's a Brian De Palma film made in 1974. And Brian De Palma, well, probably is best well known for Carrie, I guess, was certainly in horror circles.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to know that he did Scarface as well.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't realise that either until I Wikipedia'd him, yes, earlier, you know.
He made The Untouchables as well, didn't he?
Yes, and The Untouchables, yeah. And then he seemed to disappear. I think the last film he made was sort of 2019 or something that was a straight to... they don't do straight to video anymore, do they? But whatever the equivalent is.
Yeah, I was amazed by how many things that I'd seen of his, because I didn't realise Casualties of War was his, which is, in my opinion, one of the best Vietnam movies.
Right.
It's really disturbing film, but that's just Brian De Palma all over, isn't it? If it's a bit disturbing, he's probably had something to do with it.
Yes.
It was certainly a name when I was studying film as a student that used to come up with looking at sections of his films and stuff.
Yeah.
Particularly that he does a sequence straight out of Battleship Potemkin in The Untouchables, with a pram going down a flight of stairs. So, I mean, which was an interesting nod and a wink. It's kind of like, why would you do that? What's the connection between Battleship Potemkin and the Mafia? But you know, he was a noted director to be looking at.
And that nice split screen thing, that was another one of his signatures, wasn't it? Which he uses in this film. I think Carrie used
Carrie, yeah, he did it to great effect in Carrie. Yeah,
it's a very nice technique, I think.
Yeah, they had the whole bit. It was the bit in this with the beach bums, wasn't it? When he's setting up the bomb, when Phantom's put the bomb in the thing, and they're doing this Beach Boys parody with all the. It looks like Charlie Manson's Wet Dream, doesn't it? It really does.
Brian De Palma, he wrote and directed this, so he wrote the story as well. And I think in here there's the obvious Phantom of the Opera angle.
Yeah.
But we also get quite explicitly Faust. Mm-hmm. We get elements of Frankenstein.
Yes.
And Portrait of Dorian Gray as well.
Yeah.
As a theme.
Yeah.
So it's a very nice mixture of things, all tied together in this rock and roll bundle.
It's just bonkers. It really is bonkers. When I first started watching it, I was just like, what am I watching? What the hell is this?
That's what I remember when I first saw it, when I was a kid. And what blew me away was I remember watching it during a summer holiday, in the afternoon or something. And I'm thinking, how bizarre that this film was on. It was kind of like that period where you'd have TV programs like Tiswas and Razzmatazz,
a little bit anarchic kind of.
Yeah, and it kind of it fits with that as well as that weird British rock and roll film that's got the Rubettes in it and mud.
I know the one you mean.
And I can't remember the name of it.
I can't remember the name of it, but I know.
It's equally as like, I don't know what's going on. This is nonsense. This is madness. And for some reason, I mean, it's a much lower quality film altogether than the Phantom of the Paradise, but it has a feel of that for me. 70s tastelessness.
The decade that taste forgot, as people call it.
I mean, this is kind of like a glam opera, isn't it? Basically, there's lots of elements of glam in it. And the basic story is we have Swan, this impresario, played by Paul Williams, who also wrote all of the music. And he's opening this new club called The Paradise, a new rock venue. And he basically steals the songs, doesn't he? We have Winslow Leach.
I love the way Swan's introduced when you got the manager guy talking to the camera. And he's talking about the juicy fruits and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And the way Swan, where he delivers his lines and he's off screen, it's almost like Blofeld.
Yeah.
In the Bond movies. I don't know whether that was a conscious thing or not, but I got like right at the beginning, I just got these proper Bond villain vibes from him. That purring delivery. And then when he appears and he looks like Rick Wakeman's love child, it's just...
I thought his haircut reminded me of Brian Connolly out the Suite at the time. It's that very 70s haircut.
Yeah.
And I like this idea is concealed, isn't he? At first, he's behind this mirror watching the auditions. You don't even see him, which lends some...
That's what I get, the Bond villain vibes. Yeah,
makes him more... Yeah, it's more mysterious. He's the background figure rather than out front.
Do you remember the villain out of Inspector Gadget?
Yes.
Nothing but the hand. It was exactly the same. I wonder if they lifted it from this film.
Well, I was thinking like Wizard of Oz as well.
Yes, I can see that.
The man pulling the strings. But I thought it was also a very good turn by Philbin, his henchman.
That's who I was trying to... I'm trying to remember his name, yeah.
Yeah, it's so incredibly greasy and horrible, and you get a real... I got a vibe of him like a certain Hollywood film producer who was put in prison a little while back.
Yes. Yeah.
But
he's every sleazy manager you've ever read about, isn't he?
Yeah.
You know, all the...
They don't shy away from showing that sleaze, do they? I mean, there's a virtual sort of rape scene at one point, and
Yep.
The casting couch.
The casting couch. Oh, that's it.
It's horrible.
Yeah. The bit where they're all on the bed and all the rest. It's just...
Yeah.
I mean, it did seem to me that Brian De Palma might have had a few insights into the way the music industry was working, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Swan reminded me of Elton John. I couldn't get that out of my head.
Yes, he did. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to think. It reminded me of the love child of Rick Wakeman and Elton John.
Is that Rick John or Elton Wakeman?
Kept expecting him to get his paintbrush out and start playing the piano with it.
He was the thing that freaked me out most of all about the film when I saw it when I was a kid. His face freaked me out. His hair freaked me out.
It's something a bit uncanny valley about it, isn't it?
Even his build didn't seem right. And I still got a little bit of that watching it again. But now being an adult, I kind of like saw so many different levels of this film than I did when I was a kid.
So he's opening this new venue and he hears the music of Winslow Leach, played by William Finley, and basically rips him off and steals his music. And we also get the involvement of a singer called Phoenix.
Yes.
Who's coming in, who, as we see, she gets totally seduced by the whole scene and is corrupted. We see her in the back of the limo at the end taking coke and everything.
Yeah.
Totally corrupted by the business. And Winslow tries to get his revenge on Swan and ends up being involved in a very nasty accident.
Yes.
Involving a record press.
No, but before that, he ends up going to Sing Sing and they pull all his teeth out and put metal on.
Oh, yes, because he's actually arrested. Yeah, he breaks out of Sing Sing, doesn't he? There's no real hero in this film, is there? Because he's a hero, but he's a psychopath. He's totally...
Yes.
Even before he had the accident and everything, he was just totally focused on his music and himself. Totally sort of ego-driven.
Yes.
There's no real sympathetic character in this, is there?
No, because, I mean, to begin with, I thought it was going to be Phoenix, but then by the end of it, she's you know, the worst kind of, like, you know.
I'll do anything to be the star. Yeah. And that scene with the record press, by the way, they used a real record press for that.
Yes.
And the poor actor, say William Finley, was quite concerned, as you would be. So they put foam blocks in it, and the record press went and just snapped the foam blocks in half, and he was literally kind of pulled out of the record press.
Yes, it nearly happened for real. Yeah.
Bloody hell! I had no idea.
But I thought he looks great in this. It's very avian, isn't it? That sort of bird mask and the makeup and the teeth.
Yeah, it's almost like a plague doctor, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
owl-like, I thought.
There's a lot of bird imagery in the film as well. We have Swan and Phoenix. We have Swan is actually killed by being stabbed with the bird mask at the end.
Yes.
And then, of course, we have the logo, which John is proudly sporting on his top there, of the dead bird.
Yeah.
That's quite by coincidence, that is, John, you were saying.
Totally. Really, really odd synchronicity that I bought this hooded top by a company called Atticus, who were based in Los Angeles. And they've got this, what looks like a dead bird logo. So I hadn't seen this film for years, and I'm watching the film, and then sure enough, on Swan's record company, Death Records, which sounds like it should be putting out death metal, the logo is exactly the same.
It is.
It was so odd. It was so odd.
But then that's interesting, and originally it was going to be called Swan Song Records.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. But there was a certain little group who objected to that, called Led Zeppelin.
Of Zeppelin, yeah.
So they had to change all the logos and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, apparently it actually still appears in some of the scenes.
Right.
The original logo. Yeah, they didn't catch it all. But apparently there is some of the original Swan Song stuff in like the in the offices and stuff like that. If you really keep your eyes out, I'm gonna have to watch it again.
What was the logo then for the original Swan Song? Was it the same, the dead bird?
I don't know if it was the dead bird or not, but they certainly had to change the name. I don't know what they used before. But then
because Led Zeppelin's company was Swan Song Records, wasn't it? Yeah.
But then didn't you think there's elements, quite ironically, of Led Zeppelin's manager? Was it Peter Grant? Was it Grant?
Yeah.
Peter Grant, I think, who had a certain reputation.
Yes.
As being not the nicest of people to do business with.
The guy, I can never remember his name. He was the manager of the Runaways, Kim Fowley, who a friend of mine was contacted by years back. He'd heard a demo of his band, and he just contacted him saying that he wanted to do stuff with him, and dictated lyrics to him over the phone.
Wow.
He said it was absolutely peculiar, really mad, but that was before anything really came out about, his goings on with these young girls in this band. I mean, it was absolutely vile.
It just backs up totally what we see in the film, and like you say, perhaps De Palma had some knowledge of this. Well, I guess it was common knowledge in the industry at the time.
Totally, yeah.
So there was a couple of other things I noticed sort of thematically about it. We've got the birds. There's a lot of red in it. Everything backstage seems to be red, which sort of puts you in mind of hell, I guess. And then mirrors as well. There was a lot of going through mirrors or odd reflections in mirrors. I just wonder what you thought of those.
Well, Swan had his secret entrance, didn't he, through a mirror where he pulled a candelabra sort of thing and snuck through it. Yeah.
Which is very Phantom of the Opera, isn't it? That kind of very gothic sort of thing, yeah.
The sets reminded me of something like The Prisoner.
Yes.
And certainly there's a weird Japanese animated film called The Mystery of Momu or something. That's one of the Lupin III films, which has got the evil Svengali figure in it, who is so much like Swan. It's untrue, and it's very Bond villainish and manipulative, and the whole film has that similar kind of feel to it. It's like the music. I'm convinced it was covered or ripped off by Corduroy on their first album, the Thoracic Jazz Records, and it just has that feel all the way through it of like this spy drama. And I can't help but think that it was that the Phantom of the Paradise was an influence on that.
Yes, very
much. It's Bond-like. It's something Kubrick-esque about it. Clockwork Orange. There's something about the milk bar.
Yeah, I got Clockwork Orange vibes from it. The bits at the beginning when Winslow's going to the offices and all that, and that was very, very Clockwork Orange.
That was actually another thing I got from that. It was almost like Alice in Wonderland.
Yes,
the proportions of the corridor felt strange. It was almost like he was shrinking down.
Yeah. I noticed that there was a bit when the two heavies come out of the office, but the door's far too low. It like cuts off their heads, so all you can really see is their like their muscular, big, beefy biker bodies underneath this door, and then they have to duck under.
I've got it exactly what that reminded me of. It's in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or sorry, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Yeah. There's an entire corridor in that where Gene Wilder gets more and more hunched as he's going down.
Yeah.
So Winslow, our Phantom, he ends up signing this Faustian bargain with Swan. And I thought this was interesting because at this stage, I'm assuming that Swan is the devil.
Yeah.
But it transpires, Swan actually mentions in that, well, I'm under contract as well.
Yes.
And then, of course, later on, we get that whole scene where we see that Swan was going to kill himself, and the devil appears in his mirror, funnily enough, again. So, in a sense, Swan is as much a victim as the Phantom, which put an interesting spin on it, I thought.
I love the scene where, after they've signed the deal, and he's going to give Winslow back his voice, and he's sitting there and he's got this almost Dalek effect on with the ring modulation. It's almost like a Dalek.
Yeah.
And he's there and he's singing away, and Swan's there with all his stuff. It's basically like, you know, Tangerine Dreams studio, isn't it?
It was a real studio. That was the actual room that he worked in, apparently. So all those synths and everything were real stuff.
Yeah, I could just see it's like every krautrock musician's dream studio, isn't it? All these cables and doodads.
And it was interesting there, you get this, I've seen a sort of spoof on that of YouTube where you get the engineer doing all this stuff and then it cuts to the singer in the booth and then you hear the actual singer. And obviously it's very relevant today with auto-tune now. It's just pervasive in everything.
Well, that was why it was hilarious that that Eurovision, when for the first time we got Null Pois with Gemini, when they'd done the record, it was all auto-tuned and sounded fine. And then they went on there live and the auto-tune wasn't working. And it was just like,
Yeah, technology in music is always an interesting thing because it's great. It gives you freedom to experiment and do different things. But at the same time, you know, if a song is good, you should be able to play it on an acoustic guitar or a piano and it has the same power. You know, so it's one of those things, I suppose. My favourite scene is the opening night of the Paradise, where you get this, I suppose, rock opera, you could call it, or something. And it's that was the other nice thing, the Juicy Fruits of the band, right? We see them in their doo-wop phase, singing shawadi doo-wop, shawadi wadi.
Oh, man.
Although, interestingly, the song is about Eddie, Goodbye Eddie, who's committed suicide. And I did wonder if later on that was almost a reference to Swan, because we see him on the verge of suicide. That was a little connection, perhaps.
I didn't pick that up, but you're right. The Juicy Fruit's just such a wonderful name for a 70s band. You can see it, can't you?
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. And then you had the Beach Bums.
The Beach Bums, yeah.
And then what were they called? I really liked that band. The third one, because, you know, dodgy old goth here. I loved it. I got sick. Do you remember the band The Doctors of Madness?
No.
The 70s, early sort of proto goth band from the late 70s. They sort of came out the prog scene, but they were all a bit anarchic and punky and all the rest of it. And they all dressed up like corpses and all the rest of it. It sounded like them and looked like.
Oh, I'll have a look at that.
Well, I always wanted to play in a band like that. I mean, in some sense I did, because I worked for a couple of years with a band called the Texas Chainsaw Orchestra.
I've heard of those. I heard of them.
Yeah, so we played the Slime Light and Club Antichrist and Torture Garden, all those places.
That's Slime Light. I think I was going to end up there, but I didn't end up going for whatever reason. I used to go to Slime Light a lot.
Yeah. I'll put a clip up. We didn't get much video, unfortunately, but there's one or two floating around.
Yeah, I got severe Doctors of Madness vibes from him. Like when the singer does look like the guy with the makeup and everything.
And I mean, an obvious thing is Kiss with this as well, I suppose. When did Kiss first start putting all that slap on? Does anyone know?
Oh, very early 70s.
It was from the very start. It was based upon Alice Cooper. They thought Alice Cooper's persona was brilliant, and how much better it would be if all of the band had that kind of face makeup.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's what I got with Beef, who was probably my favourite character in the movie. Beef is just hilarious. But with Beef, when he comes out, I got such Alice Cooper vibes from him. The way he performed that song, you know.
There's a 70s film that's very hard to get hold of. I did have a copy of it on VHS years ago, called Nice to See You Again, Alice Cooper. The band, the Alice Cooper band, obviously it's the original band, Neil Smith on guitar and what have you. Yeah. It really reminded me that the band in the Phantom of the Paradise that we're talking about now reminded me so much of that. There's a wonderful scene where they've all got like lounge lizard tuxedos on and big steps and a big pink background with pillars. It looks like something out of a 70s penthouse photo shoot, you know.
Playboy Mansion.
Yeah, Alex Cooper comes down with this awful blonde wig on and he's singing some terrible song, and then he gets to the bottom and he's like, I've had enough of this, and he tears all of his stuff off, the band tear all their stuff off, and he's got a god-awful, like, what do you call that underwear that they used to wear in the Old West with the buttons on the arse?
Long johns
with the little flap at the back. Yeah.
And then he puts on big leopard skin platform boots, and he's stomping around, can't walk in them. But again, it's all about the Svengali. And I wonder if this is Alice Cooper's take on this film now, because it has that feel about it.
Like the bit with Beef when he's trying to figure out how he's going to sing it, and he's got the platforms on, and Phoenix is. I wonder if like she corpsed in that scene, because it looks like it's like the Biggest Dickus scene in Monty Python, isn't it, where you can tell that them actors, they just corpsed. It was, you know, and I wonder if that was the bit, you know, when Beef's there and he's got his platforms and he can't get up and his legs are going like he's like a tortoise.
Like a tortoise on his back.
When he fell over, he slipped on that on that part of the stage and fell on his backside. That was just absolutely hilarious. I thought he was wonderful.
I did.
It had a Rocky Horror feel about it as well.
Very much so.
Garrett Graham was the actor who's been in a few other things. I think he was in Star Trek, actually. I think it's been in Starsky and Hutch. He was in all sorts of American TV things. But
he was hands down my favourite character in the whole thing. I mean, I think my favourite scene was the Psycho homage, when Beef's get all coked up and he's gone in the shower and he's singing in the shower and doing his thing, and the Phantom comes in, and it's Hitchcock, isn't it? It's the shower scene.
Well, he comes in with the knife, doesn't he, and slices the shower curtain.
Yeah, and he slices the shower curtain, but it sticks a bloody sink plunger in his face. I was done then. I was rolling then. I was roaring.
The sink plunger was just such a mental addition. It was just like death by sink plunger.
So it's like the Three Stooges, isn't it, or something?
Yeah.
But that gives rise to a lovely line, because Beef, he wants out, right? Is scared shitless, and he runs out and he runs into Philbin. Philbin says, "Oh, you're just on the gear. You're just hallucinating." He says, "I know drug reel from real." That's a great line.
Take this. No, it'll bring me down.
Yes.
It's almost like a precursor to Bad News, isn't it? Or Spinal Tap. Yeah.
And then this lovely scene of this opening, and we get the great set, which is part sort of Dr. Caligari, part Frankenstein.
Lovely.
and this great performance with them scything the ends of guitars. The guitars have got scythes on, and they're basically cutting bits out of the audience to put into the big coffin to assemble the monster, to assemble Beef.
Yeah, the guitars with the big knives on the end of it was so Kiss. That was just so Kiss.
The whole thing, that film, Alice Cooper film I was talking to you about, it's got footage of the $1 Billion Babies two live performances cut in where James Randi is on stage dressed as a mad dentist with a great big dentist drill, drilling away at Alice Cooper's mouth while he's singing and stuff. And obviously there's was it the hanging scene or was it the guillotine?
The guillotine
he was using.
It was the guillotine, wasn't it?
It was so much like an Alice Cooper show.
But this is the Phantom of the Opera part of the film, right? The cloaked figure in the background. Oh, and there was that lovely shot too. I think it was with the surf planting the bomb, where the Phantom comes up in the shot. Is going up on a lighting rig in the foreground. That's a really nice shot, I thought.
I love the fact that you've all the way through that as well. You've got this Beach Boys piss take going on, but you've also got the tick of the time bomb all the way through the scene.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really nice touch. Yeah. It's just
I had to rewind and watch what was happening on the other side of the screen. There did seem to be a bit of like you can choose which one you're going to watch here. And I did because there was I was transfixed by the Beach Boys band, and then I kind of like missed what was happening on the other side.
And that was the same actors each time playing the musicians. All three bands are the same, which kind of also leads to this idea it's the same stuff, same old crap, just packaged in a different way. You know, to sell it to the next generation or whatever the next trend is, I suppose.
Yeah.
But then I thought the other interesting thing is that the big thing in Phantom of the Opera is the unmasking scene, right? The Lon Chaney, especially. I think in later ones, the stage version, he unmasks and you sort of think,
yeah,
it's a bit underwhelming.
It's Frank Spencer.
Oh, I made a bit of a mess in the theatre.
Yeah.
I dropped a chandelier.
Oh, Betty.
Whereas, Lon Chaney was a real proper. Now that's a horror face, isn't it?
Oh God, yeah.
The guy stuck. Didn't he stick wire up his nose and all sorts?
Yeah.
Man of 1,000 faces, I think, is what they used to call him.
But I thought in this, the unmasking is almost Swan is revealed as the monster at the end.
Yes, yeah. He's got that old sort of, all melted face. It's almost like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, isn't it? The effect they've done.
Yeah.
It's like his skin's melted off.
It says an awful lot about the superficiality of what has been going on. I mean, she's kind of like gone off with this guy. She's forgotten all of her original ethics and morals. She doesn't care about that Winslow. Have I pronounced his name correctly? Can't remember.
Yeah. Winslow,
But it's like Swan is still the same person. It's just that, he's now got a facial disfigurement, but she doesn't want anything to do with him now. It's hard to believe that she wanted to be with him because of his face beforehand, because it freaked the crap out of me. But, so, she was clearly only with him for his startling personality.
What first attracted you to the millionaire Paul Dagon?
Exactly. Exactly.
It wasn't a wig, was it?
And I suppose that's the Dorian Gray thing, where the inner corruption is revealed, but it is not. It's a long time since I read Dorian Gray, but Swan is quite obviously corrupt from the start.
Yes, he is.
He's not pretending to be a nice guy.
Yeah.
So it's her attraction is obviously purely based on what she can get out of the situation. I suppose. I
like the take on Dorian Gray. I like the update of it because it wasn't a portrait. It was a film can, wasn't it? I liked that. I thought that was a really clever way of doing it. We had to watch it every day.
Yes, yeah, that was nice.
As part of the Faustian deal.
I thought there was a little bit of Poe in as well, because once Winslow has finished his cantata, Swan has the room bricked up. The doorway to the room is bricked up, which was a nice little cask of Amontillado kind of.
Oh yeah, all that bit leading up to that, they've basically been keeping Winslow. I keep saying Winslow because that was a little town near where I grew up. Winslow. Swan kept feeding him full of all these pills, didn't he, to keep him docile while he was writing this concerto thing. And when he takes the final score while Winslow's out, and all these pills just fall all over the desk. I just thought that was a great scene.
I mean, that's completely true as well. I mean, even in Hollywood in the early days, you've got actors who were deliberately hooked onto cocaine when they were children. All the
starlets, they were all they had it shoved up their nostrils, didn't they? Just keep them in line.
Well, you look at people like Judy Garland, right? Yes. And what happened
Mickey Rooney was another at the same time. But I mean, this is something that happens to bands. There's like they're in the recording studio and someone turns up with the drugs.
Yes,
and I don't know what inspiration you really get from cocaine, because that just makes you feel very egotistical and hyper, doesn't it? and great.
Have you ever worked with singers?
Is that it?
Well, there's a reason why cocaine is called the wanker's drug, isn't it? Because it basically turns you into a cock.
Yeah. Liam Gallagher was a lovely bloke at one point.
Oh man, yeah. No.
The final scene, then we get Swan's portrait, or his film portrait, destroyed, and he also gets stabbed with the mask by the Phantom, as we mentioned before.
Yep.
And he's also arranged to have Phoenix shot live on stage as well, because that sells records, obviously, and gets the crowd in a frenzy. And I thought the nice thing with this last scene, we get all this death and destruction and people being stabbed and killed on stage, and the crowd think it's great. They kind of join in with it, and it becomes this weird. Well, it goes back to Bacchanalian almost. It's almost like a sort of ritual or something, isn't it? The crowd are caught up.
It is, yeah. I thought that was a great scene. Yeah, it was the bit when Winslow's crawling away because he'd stabbed himself earlier, but he couldn't die until Swan had died. That was part of the contract, wasn't it, or something like that?
Yeah.
But the way when he's crawling off and you got the crowd crawling with him, I thought that was a nice touch. Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed this. I need to go back and check it because it was something I didn't really spot until the last frame. Swan's body is sort of carried off, sort of crowd surfed away.
Yes.
And I'm sure his hands, he was making the devil horns. I'd have to go back and check it, but I just got, did he, I thought that was a nice little touch as well. He's going back to the devil.
I didn't spot that, but yeah.
I just wonder if this entire thing came out of a conversation between Brian De Palma and Paul Williams, saying, the industry, it's awful, it's like this.
It's a shit industry, you'll find out. Makes you wonder what happened to Creme Brulee, doesn't it? Really? That was their story. No. Alan from Smokey said he really liked our demo.
Yeah.
We've got to do League of Gentlemen at some time.
Yes, yeah.
We really must. All right, so that's The Phantom of the Paradise. Thoroughly enjoyable film. If you haven't seen it, we highly recommend that.
Yeah. Just before we finish, just one last thing that I found. The set designs that we'd be saying they're so gothic and all the rest of it. But I thought it was actually Sissy Spacek who did the set dressing for it. Yeah. Wow. Before her big break in Carrie. Because she was going out with the producer at the time. Or one of the production guys anyway. And she ended up doing the set dressing for it.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Saying, Carrie was like sort of late 70s, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
78, 79.
It's really interesting.
Connections.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of connections, our connection is going to be back soon, the Arkham bus.
Yep.
But we do have time for one more thing before we go.
Oh, it's here. It's under the desk.
Do you want to heft it out?
Yeah, I'll whip out Dagon's sack.
Dagon's sack.
Here we go.
Oh, lovely. And I see we have something in there. Shall we have a rummage?
Yeah, let's have a good rummage. Here's it. Have a delve. Here we go. Yep.
Thank you. Oh, this is a good one. This is from DB Spitzer, who, along with David Heath, is a co-presenter of the People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos podcast.
Yep.
David came to visit us a little while ago. Excellent podcast. If you haven't heard it, we'll put the link up below. And this is DB's question. Can deep ones become ghouls?
Oh, that's a great question.
I feel we could do an episode on this again, but...
Cthulhu Mythos interspecies rumpy pumpy.
It reminds me of that list from that other film that we covered.
The Monster Club.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not Humvees. Humvees is something else. Yeah. Weregoos, was it? Werevamps and weregoos. Shaddies. And Shadmock's only whistle. Yeah.
Because, I mean, I with ghouls, because Lovecraft never really explicitly says how they become ghouls. But I've always seen them as, because I always saw Pickman as a changeling. There's like a cuckoo in the nest.
Right.
Because I'm a big fan of Caitlin R. Kiernan. They've done a whole series of stuff about the child of the cuckoo, where the ghouls would switch babies.
Nice.
And all the rest of it. So I've kind of got that. So I kind of see them as a different species. So I guess, and deep ones, let's face it, they've been mating with everything left, right, and centre. You know, I mean, the whole point of Innsmouth is all, it was all fishy hybrids, isn't it?
Shh.
Crap, yeah.
Sorry about that. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to get the Zadok Allen treatment later on. But so I can imagine that. I can imagine that, but who really want to sort of go for a little bit of rumpy with a ghoul?
There's someone somewhere. There's always someone somewhere.
There's got to be, hasn't there? Yeah.
The thing that the ghouls and vampires are very interconnected back in the really old folk story traditions, then apparently everybody in True Blood wants to have a bit of rumpy pumpy with it. I think.
That's where True Blood to me lost its way a bit, because it started off really good and then you got into this whole family tree. We had everything in there: unicorns, fairies, pixies, werewolves.
I didn't appreciate how much it was based upon an old role-playing game.
Oh, was
There's a really nice documentary about it on not about True Blood, but about the influence of the role-playing game. It's on Amazon.
I'll check that out.
It's really worth it. It was a big thing in the 90s.
I didn't know.
Apparently, there's all vampire. I think is it called something like the Dark World or something or other.
Well, speaking of vampires, would that be another thing? Could you have? There's not really vampires in Lovecraft, is there? I can't think.
No.
As such, certainly not the traditional thing. But in theory, could you have a deep one vampire? If you could get through the scales.
Get through the
scales. Like eating a red snapper. Have you ever tried eating something like that?
What, a red snapper?
Have you had a red snapper fish? It's Caribbean fish.
Yes,
it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. You end up coughing up bits of scale before you've even finished your meal.
We're going to have to watch it. We're going to have with a shoggoth coming through your letterbox or something.
But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Then you have that other idea that deep ones are sort of virtually immortal, pretty much, aren't they?
Yes.
They're, in a way, are they Lovecraft's elves? Whereas Tolkien had this immortal elven race. Sort of Lovecraft's version of elves. I feel there's another big discussion there. We should get some people in.
Yeah.
And,
we could do an entire show on Lovecraft interspecies rumpy, couldn't we? We really.
Yes.
Presumably, evolution affects everything, doesn't it? I mean, they must all kind of like get together, and that's how evolution works. Makes you wonder what their origins were.
The ghouls are one of the few creatures that you get in our world and the Dreamlands. They seem to be able to flip between the two very easily.
Yes.
I don't think there's deep ones in Dreamlands, from what I remember.
No,
I can't remember.
not from what I remember. No,
night gaunts maybe you get crossing over a bit.
night gaunts are. Yeah, night gaunts are. Yeah.
So then you get that question: are deep ones totally terrestrial beings like us? I don't know. It throws up a lot of interesting speculation.
Yeah. Well, there's the whole theory that we're not that dissimilar, are we?
Mm.
You know, we all come from the same
Shoggoth stuff.
origin, Shoggoth stuff. Yeah, Ubo Safla.
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
the unbegotten source.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we were all fungus once.
And we will be again.
We will be again.
I, for one, welcome our mushroom overlords.
When the Me Go come to town, yeah.
Listen, compared to what we've got at the moment, then anything's an improvement. But,
yeah.
you know. All right, well, thanks, DB Spitzer. I don't think we really answered it because I'm not sure it's answerable. And it's one of those questions that throws up more questions, really, once you start talking about it.
Does. It's a good question.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll return to that sometime. It'd be good to get a panel of people in, perhaps, and have a good discussion on Lovecraftian mythos rumpy pumpy.
Yes, we should do a rumpy episode. That's what we should do. Yeah.
So it's time for us to get back on the bus. I hear he's just pulled up outside. We've got a couple of things just to mention before we leave. John, you've been involved in a new film?
Yeah, it's doing incredibly well. I was only a cameraman on it, but it's a folk horror documentary made by Severin Films. It's been licensed by Shudder from their Amazon Prime channel. It's called Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched. There's a large section in it about Lovecraft and whether or not he is folk horror or not. But it's a long film. It's a good 3 hours.
Wow. Brilliant.
I shot a few of the interviews.
Oh, excellent.
Excellent. We'll get a link up to that in the show notes. And for our next episode, I hear we're travelling south, Tim.
We are, yeah. We're going to get our thermals on, you know. Then we're going to go to a little base out in the Antarctic. Because we're going to be discussing The Thing.
Which I think is, well, it's certainly top 3 in everyone's Lovecraftian movie list, isn't it? So,
yeah, definitely.
We're looking forward to that.
Definitely.
We hope to get a couple of guests in as well to chat about that with us.
Excellent.
So it just remains to thank our patrons, Justin Woodman, Nick Lorimer, Lee Clark-Zumper, Sharon Safia and Chris Carr, and also to welcome a new patron, Russell Journey. Thanks for signing up, Russell. If you'd like to join them and help us spread our tentacles further, check out our Patreon site. You can join at 3 levels of membership and you get access to all our bonus content as well as a monthly copy of Innsmouth News. And please do send in any questions or comments you have. You can send them to Patreon, you can post up on our Facebook page, or of course you can take the plunge and send direct to dagonsack@outlook.com. That's it for this time. Thanks again for joining us, folks. It's goodbye from me, Rob Poynton.
Goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.
And me, John Chadwick.